Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this Camp Philippines event. And I understand it's the 9th year. So there's quite a tradition and Penn has had the privilege of being part of this and also a lot of leaders. We have Conroy, who is coming to Penn in a few weeks, who is helping us here. And also your leader is a Penn student as well. And the most wonderful part of this evening's presentation is that I'm joined also by 4 student panelists from Penn. And we will introduce them a little bit later, but this will be a chance for you not just to see a little bit of slides from Penn, learn a little bit about Penn, but also get the student perspective. I do hope that you're going to stay with us. We're going to actually be in this Zoom room until 11 p.m. I know some of you have other sessions to attend and want to leave, but just so you know, we'll be here. At least most of us will be here, and we'll also be able to take a lot of questions at the end. So please put those. Conroy, is there a Q&A feature, or is it going to be in the chat? How are you taking the questions, if anyone has questions as we go along?
So we'll just take them all in the chat. If you guys want to remain anonymous, then you can just message me directly.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to take you on a little bit of a journey, looking at universities in the United States. You have over 4,000, so there's a lot of choices there. There really is a college or university for every student in the US. The question is finding what's a right fit for you, the place where you're going to be happy and grow and find what you're looking for. So I just want to give you a little bit of an introduction while I also take you on a little walk through the Penn campus. So right now, if you look at the slide in front of you, you're going to see our fine arts library, which dates back to the 1800s, and Penn moved to its present location in the 1800s, but we actually go back to 1740. And if you remember from your history books, reading about Benjamin Franklin, who had a lot of influence when we became an independent nation from the British, and we needed a university for a new country. And Ben Franklin, among many of his pursuits, founded the University of Pennsylvania. But that was in the historical part of Philadelphia. We were America's first capital. It was not Washington, D.C., it was Philadelphia. The Declaration of Independence was signed there. The Liberty Bell was signed there in Philadelphia. But then 100 years later, we moved west across the Schuylkill River to what is now an area called University City. It is a self-contained campus. We've closed off traffic. Think of it a little bit as a park surrounded by a university community, research centers, teaching hospitals, and a short walk into the central part of Philadelphia. So you see from a distance, you see high-rise buildings. That's what you might call the central business district. We call it Center City. And on the other side of that is the historical part in a residential area of Philadelphia. And then you fall into another river called the Delaware River. And when you cross that, you are in the neighboring state of New Jersey, on your way to a fellow Ivy League university, Princeton University, which is the closest. We're the southernmost of the 8 Ivy League universities. The campus is about 10 by 5 city blocks, so it's very walkable. And what's interesting about Penn relative to other universities of its size is this fact that you are truly in a self-contained campus and have this university city, which is a little bit like a small college town around you, but you're only a 15-minute walk into one of the major cities of the United States. And because Philadelphia is such a historical city, it's also very walkable and it's very student-friendly. Time is not on your side because there's too much to do for the time that you have in 4 years. But to be able to spontaneously take advantage of a city that doesn't involve a lot of planning allows you to do that more often. And actually to the right of the stadium, we have a train station, and that takes you out to Philadelphia Airport, a couple of stops later. So, and if you go to the left of this picture, you have a short walk, about 10 minutes, depending on how fast you walk, to get to the main train station of Philadelphia, where you can be in New York City in about an hour, a little closer to 2 hours in Washington, D.C. So what does that mean? It means that you can have this campus experience, you can have the city experience if you're a city person and enjoy everything the city has to offer, and you can be very independent about getting around. America is a country with great distances, and sometimes that includes campuses, but for us, everything is very condensed. The other piece to take note of is that we have about half of our students are undergraduates, and they're divided into 4 different colleges, yet are a full undergraduate community. And we'll talk a little more about what that means, but we also have 12 graduate and professional schools on the same campus. So think of the inner ring of Penn being the undergraduate experience, a lot of the academic buildings, and then you have our residential buildings called college houses that we're going to talk a little bit about. And then the outer circle are the graduate and professional schools, but it's really walking across the street to the nation's first medical school. And I know Conrad is going to be staying at one of our college houses called King's Court. That's right next door to the law school, And why does this matter? Well, because when it comes to research opportunities, when it comes to opportunities to have exposure, even say an engineering student that wanted to start a graduate program early, it's all right there. There are no distances involved, and it's something that you can take advantage of. And you're also going to have graduate fellows living in your houses. But let's take a little bit of a walk and a deeper dive into Penn. And now, so this is just a little bit of what we have planned that I mentioned to you earlier if you just joined us. And this is convocation, which is the beginning of our formal student orientation. All our student panelists that are sophomores or above, would have had this experience of everyone coming together, sitting by College House with the faculty marching in with their robes and singing the red and blue, the Penn song, right in the center of campus. And that's the first major event that brings the entire class together. And the end is, of course, going to be graduation. But let's continue on here. So we talked a little bit about pen size, is that right for you? Some of you might want a larger university, some of you might want a smaller college. We have the liberal arts college experience, but that's within the university, and there are also other undergraduate colleges. I mentioned that we're one of the 8 Ivy League universities. Well, what does that mean? It means it affects our financial aid policies, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It means we're private. It means that we're some of the oldest universities, in the East Coast of the United States. And Ivy League really means sports league. We play against each other. We are a Division I university, but we also have club sports and intramurals. And right now, I don't know if any of you are watching the Tokyo Olympics, but we have 6, as we call them, Penn Quakers that are representing their countries, and there are 5 countries represented in multiple sports in the Tokyo Olympics. And if you watch the opening exercises, the young man who carried the Bermuda flag is from Penn. So we're very proud of that, but that's also what the Ivy League is all about. Liberal arts and sciences, if you're going to the United States, that is very much the philosophy of the first degree. Regardless of what you pursue, you're going to have the depth and the breadth of your education. And also this idea that you don't have to decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life or what you're going to major when you apply to the university. I mean, within the liberal arts college, you really have until the second term of your second year before you formally have to declare a major. And you are also not defined. You're not going to Penn to study biology. You're going to Penn for a 4-year experience, and your major is going to be, at least in the liberal arts, is about 1/3 of your degree. And then you're going to have your general requirements. And within the Ivy League, that's going to be everything from an open curriculum at, say, a place like Brown to a core curriculum at Columbia. And Penn has what's called structured choice, which gives you an opportunity to make choices, but we also want certain ingredients in your broader education. That's sort of the breadth of your liberal arts. And then you have something called electives, and that's about a third of your degree in the liberal arts. It's a little bit different when you go into the professional schools, but that gives you really the opportunity to try different subjects, whether it's just, I'd like to take an art course because it would be fun, or I'm interested in both biology and French literature. Can I do both? Or I want to take advantage of the greater Penn and take classes outside of the college that I'm in, and maybe do a minor in something, say, like computer sciences or healthcare or something like that, that might cross different undergraduate schools. So those kinds of decisions can be made once you're there. And then there are also dual degree programs where we're combining that. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we go more into the academic areas. What about research? Research, we will meet you where you are, and it is available in all fields. So don't just think about STEM as an area of research. One can do research in English, one can do research in history. A student can start from the beginning using the resources of CURF, which is the Center for Undergraduate Research, or you can be at the level where you can do independent research and ask for funding. And this is where also having 12 graduate and professional schools and all the research centers and so much being available to undergraduates is right at your fingertips. And we've all been following this awful pandemic that the world is dealing with right now, but I don't know if you're aware of the fact that the new technology that's used in the mRNA vaccines in terms of Pfizer and Moderna was initially developed by two faculty at the University of Pennsylvania. And then, of course, a lot has happened since then because this technology has been refined, over the years. But there's a lot of opportunities for you if you're interested in research. And we already talked a little bit about Philadelphia. What do you want to have in your backyard? You have to plan things if you want to go out in the countryside and go hiking. That's not in your backyard. But what is in your backyard are all the wonderful things that a major city would have. Is that something that's important to you? What do you want easy access to? And we talked a little bit about Ben Franklin. And the only thing I wanted to just share about dear old Ben, whose bench Conrad sat on, is his philosophy. And that's actually relevant now in the 21st century. When he founded Penn back in the 1700s, he was very much looking at developing a university for a new country. So theory was important, always has, always will be, but also looking at how to apply that in the real world. And also how to make a difference in the world. And that philosophy is something that really has continued on into the present day Penn. So that's another thing to think about, what's the mission of the university? What resonates across, the Penn community? So we talked about the center of campus. So this is what it looks like. So this is about, again, a 15-minute walk into downtown Philadelphia. So think of it again, as I said, a little bit like a park-like atmosphere. And let's talk a little more about your academic options. One thing that's important for you to be aware of is that when you apply to Penn, you will need to choose one of the 4 undergraduate schools where you want to get your primary degree from. And this is unless you're in a dual degree program. For example, we have a program, the Huntsman program in International Studies and Business, or the Jerome Fisher program in Management and Technology as an example. You don't have to, as I said earlier, declare a major if you are not sure yet, if you want to be undecided within the arts and sciences, or you can declare an intended major. But if something changes, you still have the opportunity to make those decisions. And minors and elective courses, things like that, you can clearly decide when you get to Penn. Within Wharton, you need to know that you don't just want a career in business, but you want to study business as an undergraduate. But your concentration within Wharton is something that you can wait with. And with engineering, you have an option of being undeclared your first year, but most students will choose the field of engineering that you're interested in. But think about whether you are an applied learner that might be interested in, say, Wharton, or are you more of a theoretical economist where the liberal arts would be the right fit for you? Are you more of a STEM student within the College of Arts and Sciences, or are you more applied that you would want to be in an engineering program? It's all about options, and there are over 90 different fields of study at Penn. So this is the center of campus, and you could be in a seminar. This is the spring day when the weather was nice and the professor went outside with students. You could be in a lecture course, but about 81% of classes have 20 or fewer students in them. Most students like to have a mix of classes, and I know our student panelists will talk a little bit about their own experiences later on. We also have something called academically based community service classes, which are courses where you're learning in the classroom, but you're also taking that out to Philadelphia. It could be an art course where you're painting a mural with Professor Golden and working with the community in Philadelphia. We also have global seminars where, for example, now with the pandemic, there are clearly been travel restrictions, but if we're, our hope is that things will improve over time. But I'll give you an example of an environmental studies course where you were, studying climate change on campus, and the professor took the students to Iceland afterwards to really look at what was happening in the field. So those types of courses are available as well. And this is the college house system that I was referring to earlier. There will be 13 come August, because we have a brand new house that hasn't even been named yet for second year students called New College House. Not very creative, but I know we will find a name for it soon. This is the quad. So the architect was inspired by the colleges at Oxford University back in the 1800s when we moved to our Western campus where we are now. 3 of the college houses are here. But we also have, as I said, modern college houses. Some are dormitory style, some are apartment style. Students can move from one house to another. They can, stay in one house and take on leadership positions in the house. Students are required to live on campus for 2 years, but students can live on campus for 4 years and make that sort of their second home. It's all about choice. What's important with Penn's college house system is that you're going to have not just undergraduate mentors, or as we call them, RAs, and other kinds of support in the house, but you're also going to have some of our graduate students. Right next to what we call the quad is Penn's medical school. So you might very well see a graduate fellow with scrubs coming back from the teaching hospital, which is next door to Riepe College House. But you also have professors living in the house, and you also have a house director. So the house is sort of a microcosm of Penn. It's a community within a community, and really a place to call home and a place to informally interact with faculty as well. And some classes are taught in the houses. And this is one example of a room. I don't know, Kate, if this looks at all like your room. But this is not in one of the quad buildings, but it's one of the other buildings. But this gives you one example. And we also have a number of non-residential houses. And this is, again, a chance to build community within Penn. Perry World House is a very important house for our international students, because that's where we have orientation activities. That's where we have, a special graduation ceremony. The main graduation ceremony is out on Franklin Field. We also invite speakers. There are other student activities that take place. Next door to Perry World House is Kelly Writer's House. So that, if you're interested in poetry, writing, that might be a second home. Diagonally across from that is Civic House. If you're interested in civic engagement, which many students at Penn are, you might call home. And for our returning students, we'll also have the Tang and Entrepreneurial Center, which will be, about a block down from where Perry World House is. If you go down Locust Walk in the other direction, you're going to have the Center for Undergraduate Research. A block away from that is going to be the Performing Arts House. Then we have Weiss Tech House. So there are a number of these communities that you are going to be closely affiliated with. And then of course, and I'm going to leave this up to our student panel, but then there's a tremendous amount of activity going on outside of class, over 400 different student groups. And we talked a little bit about the sporting opportunities, but there's so much more to Penn. Very active Model United Nations, and Conroy, we're trusting you're going to take your MUN talents and continue that at Penn. Also, debating is very active. We talked about community service, a very active performing arts community, if there is anyone with good voices or theatrical skills in the room. Lots of opportunities to engage and balance that with your education. And of course, we talked about the global seminars earlier, but there are a lot of opportunities for students to engage in the world at large, not just on campus. There are exchange programs through Penn Abroad. There are the global seminars. There are also internship opportunities that you can have during the breaks, as well as research opportunities that go beyond the Penn campus. So we really are embracing the world and incorporating that into your education, and a lot of service opportunities as well. And here you see some examples of some of the performing arts groups and some of the sporting events as well. The young man who's holding the rugby ball, he's from Zimbabwe and was one of our key players on, if anyone watched club rugby at Penn. And then we have celebrations that bring everyone together. A number of years ago, the class board at Penn thought that bringing the Indian tradition of Holi to campus would be a great new tradition for Penn. The idea of everyone coming together with white shirts on and just throwing colors on each other and celebrating spring, which is a very important part in terms of weather changing. I know the Philippines has, it either rains or it doesn't rain. Here we get snow on College Green, we get hot, humid summers, and then we get lovely spring where we celebrate Penn Holi, and that brings the whole class together. And that's right where everyone sat for their opening exercises for convocation. And then we graduate, that we call commencement, the beginning of the rest of your life. One tradition, again, you're back on College Green, walking down Locust Walk. And one tradition is that all your professors are going to be applauding you as you walk out on Franklin Field to get your Penn diploma to start the rest of your life. And remember, your affiliation with Penn is a lifelong experience. You know, we were just talking earlier, for those of you who heard us chatting at the beginning of this session informally, about how strong the alumni community is all over the world, including in the Philippines. And we have generations of alumni. And that's also part of your lifelong network. So how do you apply? For those of you who are looking at 2022 entry, we're continuing for one more year to be test optional. 2023, we're not sure yet. We're still considering it, but as long as this awful pandemic is raging, you should not feel any pressure to take standardized testing. You know, we're very comfortable with holistic admission to look at, you know, the academic credentials from your school and other kinds of exams, such as the IB or other exams that you might be enrolled in. Penn has both an early decision and a regular decision program. Early decision are for students who really know that Penn is their first choice, and they're going to be ready by November 1st to make that commitment. Common application, August 1st, it will go live. commonapp.org. You probably have talked about that at camp. So I'm not going to go into details, but feel free to ask questions if you have that. And also some students will use the Coalition app. But over 900 universities use the Common Application. And, you know, there's a lot of great research tools on there as well. We are an Ivy League school. What does that mean? It means we do not give athletic scholarships and we do not give merit scholarships. None of the Ivy League schools do. Everything is based on need. And we do have one of the 10 largest budgets in the United States for international students, but we are still need aware for international students. So it means it will be taken into consideration when you apply. But if you need financial aid, and with the way economies are going around the world, there are many, many students that do. We do 100% meet a family's financial need, and as that changes, but you need to think about that when you apply, because it is a set of funds that we will, spend. So it's not a situation as an international student where halfway through your Penn education, you say, oh, I should have applied for aid, can I come now? Because we've already committed the funds. So this is very, very important to bring back to your families to say, what are the next 4 years of university going to look like? Will I need financial aid? The other good piece of news is that we don't build loans into your financial aid programs, which means that, say, for students who aspire to go to graduate school where there might be heavy loans in certain fields, you can graduate without a debt. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I just want to pause on this. If anyone wants, this will be recorded so you can come back to it, but I have some suggestions here for you to get more information about Penn. One is to join our mailing list, to go up and register so that we can tell you about other events that you might want to join and keep you informed. Here's a general email address for any and all questions that we don't answer or that come up later on. Feel free to write to that. And I would really encourage you to continue visit Penn virtually, because there are so many opportunities there to learn more about Penn. We have recorded a number of sessions, an essay workshop as an example. We've recorded an alumni panel. We've recorded a financial aid workshop. We've recorded a whole hour on how to apply to highly selective universities like Penn with tips on Penn YouTube channel. So do take advantage of that. That might be helpful for you, and things you can also show your family. We're active on social media. And also where I would start is really to take a virtual tour. Our tour guides will be back to give live virtual tours, but you also have recorded tours that you can do on more convenient Manila time. But all of that can be found on our virtual site. And we will be giving all kinds of different sessions throughout the course of the academic year. So please keep an eye on that site when it comes to that. And on that note, the only last thing I wanted to say is that remember that college is a 4-year experience. You are not defined by your major. Come with an open mind, put the pieces together. It's who you meet. It's what you do in and out of class. It is what you do on your breaks. Now everyone is having, for our summer, a long break until classes start. And it's also your journey after you finish. So keep that in mind. And on that note, I'm going to move on. And here are our wonderful student panelists. So I'm going to take this down, but before I do that and we start the dialogue, I just wanted you to give an introduction. If you wouldn't mind giving the audience your name, and maybe it might be interesting for them to hear where you went to secondary school or high school in the Philippines, as I know that's a good representation on the panel, and what year you are at Penn and the program you're in. And, just a quick synopsis before we go into more detail on your Penn journey. So Kate, would you mind starting?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Kate. I graduated from the British School Manila in 2019, and I study operations and retailing at the Wharton School of Business.
Thank you. And Alex, on to you.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am currently a rising senior, and for secondary school, I went to Xavier School. I'm studying computer science in the School of Engineering and finance in the Wharton School.
So wonderful example of combining two fields that we talked about earlier, and I know we'll ask you more about that. Is Angelica here?
Hi, yeah, sorry, I was late.
So glad you could join us.
Yeah, so I'm also a rising senior. My high school was in Para, Woodrose in the South, and I study math at Penn with minors in computer science and Chinese.
Oh, wonderful. And that gives an example of what we talked about earlier. And, we can go into a little more detail of how you can put together different interests that can be very varied in your degree. And then Lorenzo.
Hi, I'm Lorenzo. I graduated from International School Manila in 2020. And at Penn, I'm studying physics in the college and mechanical engineering in the School of Engineering.
Wonderful. So right now, let me take this these slides down so we can see you a little better. And Conroy, I don't know, is there a way of I guess there's not a way of just getting the panelists up on the screen, right? Everyone can see each other, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked a little bit about your academic program that you are following, but in no particular order. But if you could maybe share your favorite class or your favorite academic experience. I know you've had a lot of experiences at Penn, but what comes to mind from an academic perspective? Something that you have done that was memorable, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with your major or your degree, but something that resonates. Who feels inspired?
I actually have an answer. I think I have a lot of favorite classes, but one very unexpected class that I didn't know I would love was in fall semester. So my first semester at Penn, I took a Chinese class. I am not Chinese, never had Chinese ever in my life. Also no context with like the language at all. But I just absolutely fell in love with my classmates, my teachers, the class culture. And I told myself, okay, like one more semester, I'll take another one. I just kept taking Chinese classes. And like now I'm graduating next year with like a minor in Chinese. Um, I think that just goes to show how like there are gems in Penn that will really make you like learn to love something new just because like it's a good learning experience.
Angelica, I'm so glad you brought that up because, you know, I know it's something that advisors and faculty encourage students to come with an open mind and lots of intellectual curiosity and just see where that takes you. And you did that. And, you know, it took you down a path that maybe when you were back in secondary school that you didn't anticipate, right? It wasn't like that checklist that I have to do this, this, and that, you know. I mean, you obviously want to have an idea of what you're interested in and what you want to do, because otherwise it's hard to choose the school that offers some of that. But it is a long journey. And I know some of you are further along than others, you know, close to graduating. And for some, you know, it's Lorenzo, right? It's nearly the beginning, and Conroy, you haven't been there yet, so for you it has not started yet, right? Anyone else wanted to comment on anything in terms of their academics, or if you've had any research experiences or anything that you would want to share about your academic program that you're in? Lorenzo, any thoughts from it looked like you were about to say something.
Yeah, so I'm in the Viper program, which is a dual degree program focused on energy research. And so like this summer, I'm on campus doing research at the Bargaton lab. And I'm really enjoying what we're doing. I didn't like applying to the program. I was very unsure of how, you know, research would be, what would be expected of me as a freshman. So they've been very like accommodating with like when there are areas I'm not sure about, and then it's also very like independent and, you know, self-directed with research, which I also enjoy. So I think, yeah, if you're interested in engineering, research is definitely something you should try out because it's an opportunity. You know, it's like another field that you can enter as an engineer.
Oh, that's a really good point. And Viper might make you think about, you know, a snake or something like that. But Penn, like many places, uses acronyms, and it is a very powerful program because you get both an engineering degree and a STEM degree in the liberal arts college, and it has a very heavy research component, you know, including committing your summers, or our summers, shall we say, because depending on where you are in the world, right? But you are in Philadelphia, so it is your summer now. It's hot and humid here. but the idea is that interdisciplinary nature as well, right? Looking at alternative energy, looking at what we can do along those lines. So Lorenzo, you made a strong commitment to wanting that because you were interested in all its components. And there are also students who might not know or want the full commitment to a particular area, but want to sort of try different things. I mean, Angelica, you mentioned, studying Chinese as an example to complement some of the other things that you were interested in and having time in your schedule, because it is your electives that you use. And you do have minors, you do have double majors as an opportunity. But your program is quite unique. And Lorenzo, any comments in the sense of, as you were looking at Penn, what drove you to apply to the Viper program per se? Anything that would be helpful for the audience?
I think for me, it's always just been an interest in renewable energy. And I think I've also wanted to be an engineer for, I guess, ever since I was a kid. And so as I was looking around at different programs in universities, I mean, there wasn't a program that really focused on energy as much as Viper did. And I think that's what really drew me to the program. It's like an interdisciplinary dual degree, which focused on one of my biggest interests, which was renewable energy. So yeah, that's basically why I applied to the Viper program.
Great. Well, thank you. Anyone else that would want to share anything before we start talking about other topics?
Yeah.
Yes.
One thing that I didn't expect coming into Penn was how good the computer science program would be, because I didn't coming in, Penn isn't really known for the computer science program. And so when a lot of people come in, they like Penn isn't like top tier supposedly, but I know a lot of people who have like transferred from tech schools and say that Penn's computer science like classes are actually super rigorous, and I completely agree. And one of like the things that really stands out to me is like a class that I took last semester was an internet class where we had to basically create the internet from scratch, which was really interesting because like there's so many nuances that I never realized before. And fun fact, the first ever computer is like currently housed in Penn, and that's something that Penn doesn't really advertise, and I feel like they should capitalize more on.
No, I agree with you, because most of it's at the Smithsonian in Washington, but we do have a room with a little plaque outside if you walk beyond that tree, Conroy, that I was telling you should stand under, that you can go into it. But for the benefit of everyone in this Zoom call that maybe can't imagine the time when we didn't have devices using computers, describe to everyone what does it look like, the ENIAC, like this little sample in that room, and the history of it, because it might be interesting, for people to hear in the 40s where it all started at Penn.
Yeah, so it was like the first Turing complete machine, and it's like it occupies an entire room in the engineering building, and its processing power is probably so little compared to the processing power we have right now, but yeah, it's really historic and really interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, for anyone with historical interest, there's a lot of history at Penn, and because we've been around since the 1700s, I would hope that there's some history at Penn, but the ENIAC is one that's tucked away, shall we say. You hear about the first medical school, the first business school and all of that. But the ENIAC, it's considering where the world is today. And hopefully we'll hear also about the mRNA, which has so much potential for the future for medicine and healthcare, and so important for us right now. But Alex, I think you brought up another important point too, is that, the fit for Penn is and Lorenzo, clearly, you exemplified that, is that interdisciplinary piece, right? Is on one campus that, that is very condensed, that you have access to so many different fields, and that means faculty collaborate in programs, but also there's a way for you to put these programs and research and other pieces together. And I think that's one out of many considerations to look at when looking at Penn. Do I have multiple interests? And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with all of that, but I know that it's there at Penn, and I can put those pieces together and see where that journey will take you. For some it's dual degree, for some it's a second major, for some it's a couple of courses, but the point is, it's there. Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, just talking about kind of the interdisciplinary part of Penn, one of the classes that I actually really enjoyed was a class I took last semester about law and social values, and it's part of the general curriculum under Wharton. And I just thought it was so interesting, not just from a technical perspective, but I think that class has shaped the way I see kind of the government and the legal system. And I think classes at Penn that really apply to your daily life are just some of the greatest classes I've ever taken.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And there are some requirements, clearly, Lorenzo, you probably have a long list, in order to fill for engineering and for the program and all of that. But with the elective system, and also because we don't have a core curriculum, Penn is a place where students make their choices, and I think you also need to think about the personality fit with Penn, and I'd love to get the student perspective of this, but what we often hear is that it's really important to come to Penn, with an open mind, but also to be in the driver's seat. You have lots of support, but you are ultimately going to make these decisions, right? And if you're going to get the most out of your Penn experience, it's what you do with your time and the decisions you make and how you proactively, like, we're not going to hand you a checklist when you first arrive. We're going to hand you more of a blank canvas and say, okay, here are the colors, but you paint your own. And, I'm sure the four of you all have different Penn experiences, even though there's some overlap. But there's more to Penn than the academic experience. We talk a lot about the holistic education, the four-year experience. And I know, from your secondary school years back in the Philippines that you were all involved, in your respective schools and communities. But where has that taken you at Penn? Would you want to talk a little bit about, and I know, Lorenzo, it's a little difficult for you because, there's the pandemic, you're doing research, so you haven't had that full experience yet, but for the rest of you, and I know we've got some rising seniors here, tell us a little bit what you've done outside of class and what that experience is like that might be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, there's so much to do, so much communities outside of Penn, and one of the reasons why I love Penn so much. Something that all of us are really involved in is like the PPA. It's like Penn Philippine Association, and it's basically just the Philippine community in Penn, and we're all really close, and it's a really great community. Some other things I'm part of, in high school I was in the school paper, and I continued that here, but I moved more from writing to developing like the website and stuff for the school paper, so that was really fun. I am also
part has a number of student publications. Is it the Daily Pennsylvanian, what we call the DP that you're involved with? Okay.
Yeah, the Daily Pennsylvanian, and something super cool about the DP is like they're completely self-sustaining, so like they earn their own ad revenue to sustain themselves, which I find really cool. And I'm also part of like entrepreneurship organizations and business fat.
Great. Anyone else that want to share a little bit about how they spend their time outside of class and what kinds of activities have been meaningful to you, Kate?
Yeah, so in high school, I did a lot of impact-oriented initiatives, and I think this really grew my love for social impact that I wanted to continue at Penn. So one of the kind of clubs I'm most active in is the Penn International Impact Consulting Club, wherein we do kind of pro bono consulting for a lot of nonprofits worldwide. And kind of continuing through that, Penn is really just a place where you could really explore your interests. And so even beyond kind of joining clubs focused on impact, I've also been able to explore kind of my interest in the legal field by joining the Penn Undergraduate Law Journal and developing my skills in business by joining the Student Federal Credit Union and the Phi Avenue Business Fraternity. So overall, I think Penn is just a place where you could really discover yourself and what you like and what you're interested in.
Well, that sounds great. And Kate, I mean, I think we have to recognize that what you're able to do and not able to do, and how one has to be creative about looking for other opportunities during the pandemic, and again, we're all hoping that the future will change, but we also have to be realistic about what today looks like. And I'm just curious, because of the pandemic and the global reach of the social impact, how has the club dealt with that, and how have you managed? I mean, has it gone virtual, or have people been able to do some projects in person?
Mm-hmm. So Peak specifically focuses on kind of these on-site projects wherein, for example, if we have a project in Vietnam where the client is in, then in May we'll fly to the client and do some work there. So because of the pandemic, that part's been canceled. But I think the pandemic has, in a sense, made our work more impactful, just because a lot of these nonprofits have very limited resources because of the pandemic, and us being able to help them go through that just makes the work more rewarding.
Well, that sounds great. So it sounds like the club has been very, very active. It's just been different, because of the challenges, And as we're on that topic, I know the audience might want to know a little bit, how has the pandemic sort of affected you? I know Lorenzo, when it was time to first start, right, was at the peak of the pandemic, now you're in Philadelphia. But would you or anyone else care to just talk a little bit about what that experience has been like? I mean, we are back to, full-time in-person classes, our activities are picking up, we've been fortunate in Philadelphia, on a vaccinated campus, to be able to do that. We're having in-person orientation, students are already arriving. So this coming year is going to be very different, but, it's a big world out there, and science will drive what will happen. So, but I know it's on everyone's mind, so I just wanted to hear a little bit firsthand from your own experiences, and any advice that you have, moving forward for the students that are looking at how this might impact the beginning, at least, of their education. Anyone who wants to share?
I guess I can go. So yeah, I came to campus in January. So that was the spring semester. And so classes at that point were still online, but we were allowed to move into the dorms and use the dining halls, but it was very limited, and there was a lot of restrictions. But I mean, as the semester progressed, some restrictions were lifted, and so it wasn't too hard for me, in terms of all the restrictions and the lack of mobility, because we were kind of used to it in the Philippines, given that our lockdowns were very long and quite strict. So I think the most difficult part was really just finding the separation between school and with your personal life, because spending your whole day in your room or your dorm and doing classes there wasn't really a transition between that and then your personal life after, because you were just in the same place the whole time. So I guess that was one of the biggest issues for me during the semester. But I think in the fall, it should be all in-person classes, and that separation shouldn't be as difficult anymore to manage, because we'll be able to go around and go to different places, and campus should be mostly open.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that. And Lorenzo, you probably know too, I mean, for the first time in Penn's history, we're having an orientation for second-year students, because there was no, orientation, new student orientation is an international student orientation is a big deal on campus, and it starts this week with our international forerunner, which is a virtual orientation for the whole world that's going on right as we speak. So, your class, Lorenzo, sort of missed that because, most students, many students didn't come until now. And those that came like you typically came, for the second term, not the first term. So, but I would imagine that also we talked, Kate, a little bit about how that changed some of the club activities. But has that also changed a little bit your plans? I mean, Lorenzo, I know whether there's a pandemic or not, you would have, been doing research this summer, being part of the Viper program, but for the rest of you, has it changed a little bit what your plans were outside of the academics? In terms of what I call our summer, right? The long break between May and classes starting up at the end of August.
From a completely personal perspective, I was actually supposed to go home to the Philippines in my freshman summer, but because of the pandemic, my flight got canceled and I got stuck in Philadelphia. And it was actually one of the best kind of happy accidents that happened to me because I got stuck in Philadelphia with a lot of other Filipinos and we just had fun kind of in each, like Sina, and we actually had fun in each other's company to the point that Sina and I got so close, we're now actually roommates in Philly.
Oh, that's so nice. So actually, Lorenzo, you're in Philadelphia. Kate, you're in Philadelphia. You're in Philadelphia. So Alex, where are you today?
I'm in Philadelphia.
You're in Philadelphia as well. Okay, Conroy, you're the only one that's in Manila of this Penn contingent.
I'm in Manila as well.
Oh, you are in Manila. Okay. So anyone else that would want to talk about the extracurriculars at all, or do you feel you've shared what you want to share and we might want to move on to other topics? Okay. We talked about coming to Penn and orientation and so on. You mentioned, Alex, that there's a very supportive Filipino community, and Kate, that Kate's also out formally or informally, right? There's the association, but also people are connecting with each other. Summer in Philly. But talk a little bit about the transition, because you're representing different classes here, so everyone hasn't been oriented during the pandemic. What was that transition like? And a few of you went to national school in the Philippines, a few of you to international schools, but where did you get your support when you came to Penn? How was that transition like? And how did you build community when you arrived? And any tips for the audience on this front?
I would like to share that just doubling down on the influence of the Filipino community on my life and also just the lives of my friends in Penn. Coming into Penn, my parents didn't come with me, so I was a teenager in this very foreign land. I didn't know how to use credit cards. I didn't understand that my phone was locked to my SIM at Globe, so I had no contact whatsoever. But a senior actually, his name's Eugene, he's a great guy, gave me shelter, guided me through where my dorm was, and I honestly could not have survived without him. And then after him, I just met everyone else in the community. And if or when you get in, it really is just, it won't be hard because we're going to be the ones reaching out to you. There aren't a lot, so you really look for everyone and introduce everyone to the people on campus, but also the alumni. And anytime you need any help, formally or informally through the organization, we're always going to be there to help you move boxes or tell you where to eat or answer questions about professors you should or shouldn't take, where you should live, where you should hang out on campus. Yes, Maria Jose.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else that would want to share about, how they found community, what that transition was like? Lorenzo?
Oh yeah. So
I'm sorry, I thought you,
think-
oh, now you're unmuted.
Yeah,
I
no,
just wanted to
actually-
make sure you were ready.
Yes. I think I found my community mostly with the Pinoys here. It was, yeah, they were very welcoming and helped me, and enjoy and explore the city because um, they knew it better than I did and better than probably most of the freshmen did. So they were a really supportive and great community that I could hang out with and learn about Penn and learn about the city with.
Any other tips or reflections, Kate or Alex? Any thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I think kind of moving into this foreign country, I'd never really been to the United States for a bit except for college tours. I felt my whole world changing, and seeing kind of the Filipinos and having that element of culture that was still there felt like I brought a piece of my old world into my new world, and it was really comforting.
Well, that's great to hear. You mentioned a little bit, Lorenzo, you were mentioning being new to, the campus community, exploring Philadelphia and so on. We talked at the beginning of the session a little bit about, part of the Penn experience is having, a backyard of the major city of Philadelphia, and it's walkable, it's close. And many of you are on campus now this summer, but any favorite Philadelphia experiences that would be appropriate to share with the audience, that because everyone hasn't had a chance to visit Philadelphia, especially with the pandemic, but just in general, as Angelica, you were saying, I came, and by myself, so anything about the city that's a favorite sort of memory. I mean, when there's not a pandemic, we rent the Philadelphia Art Museum for new student orientation, and everyone gets to look at the art, and, have a big party. And, for those of you who are seniors, you might remember that experience, but Lorenzo, you missed that, so any thoughts, on Philadelphia that you wanted to share with the audience who maybe don't know the city as well? Anything that resonates? Alex.
I'm really into food, and I think that one of my favorite parts of Philadelphia is how good the food is. Because in general, like the food, it's a lot more expensive than in the Philippines, but comparative to like New York and other cities around Philadelphia, it's a lot cheaper. So you get really good value for really good food. And I'd say like I'd have like some of the best meals I've ever had in Philadelphia.
So you don't have to worry about that. Campus dining is your only culinary treat. Lots of restaurants, students do go as groups and go out to dinner, and there's restaurant week and things like that during the academic year. How about the rest of you? Any Philadelphia experiences? Or if you want to continue the food journey discussion, anything that would be helpful for the audience to hear that you wanted to share?
For me, I think when there was still snow, I went down to Penn's Landing with my friends. And so for the first time, I was able to ice skate there. And it was a fun, slightly painful experience. But I think there's a whole like fair there with like carnival games and an ice rink during the winter. So I think that was one of my more memorable experiences in my first year here.
And that was a different orientation, coming from Manila straight into the dead of winter, and going ice skating. Now, we have 4 seasons, and the winters, with climate change, no one knows what the climate is going to be like in the terms of weather, but normally, our winters are not as harsh as further north in the United States. I mean, we are the southernmost Ivy, and if you look at Europe, we're around Italy in terms of that sort of climate range, but we do have 4 seasons, so it does snow. You will get some snow, but thanks for sharing that. Any other reflections before we move on? I heard you were talking a little bit about this, how wonderful it was to be welcomed by the Filipino community at Penn. And you were also alluding to, the Filipino alumni. I know that, when you apply to Penn, you'll have an opportunity to have an interview, and I know our Filipino alumni are very active with that. And we have a very, very strong tradition, in terms of our, Penn alumni community around the world. And the Philippines has been one of a very strong alumni groups. But I'd love to hear a little bit from your perspective as students in terms of engaging with the alumni and just sort of feeling that red and blue Penn community on a broader scale that would be of interest to the audience. Anyone would want to share their thoughts on that or elaborate a little more?
I have experience with the alumni. I think I find them incredibly welcoming. I feel like it's the same level of welcoming as when I was a freshman at Penn and like unaware. I say that because like when I came back to Manila, I met up with one alumni and he just like kind of introduced me to everyone else. And suddenly like the first time I'm meeting this one person, we're going out to like spin class already and we're going out on restaurants. And I think it's just such a strong network because even like beyond the social scene, you can ask them for like life advice or like career advice. And like right now I'm in a startup and I was like reaching out to like a bunch of businesses and I just reached out my first like method was to reach out to the Penoys. We call ourselves the Penoys because like Pinoy Pen. But yeah, so I reached out to the Penoys and they are already incredibly helpful. I think in all aspects of life, they're just the best network you can have, like amongst, like, in my opinion, schools abroad.
Well, thank you for that, Angelica. And any other comments on that? And I'm looking at Conroy here because we also have to. I see there's some questions that are lining up in the chat, so we've got to get to that as well. But would love to hear if anyone else has any comments before we move on.
Sorry, I just want to interrupt because I need to inform participants that attendance is already recorded and other schools are already starting their second information session. So if you want to listen to that, then you're free to leave. But if you want to listen to this panel, then please stay. Thank you.
Great. Okay. I know that there are a number of students still here on the panel, and I'm going to ask you to go back a little bit in time, when you were going through the application process yourselves and now reflecting back. Any tips as for anyone who's thinking of applying to Penn or even broader, applying to college in general, anything that any advice you would want to pass on? I know there's a lot of advice going on, Conroy, with camp counselors and all of that, but would love to sort of get that Penn perspective, from our panelists here.
I think I would suggest not to try to do everything. I think to get into Penn, you don't need to be on the swim team and be the head of the student council and kind of do all of these different kinds of activities. I think it's more beneficial to stay true to what you're passionate about. And I think that's because admissions officers will see that and see how you can continue that passion at Penn.
Thank you for that. Anyone else?
I think in the more like academic side, see if like the school, offers you, for example, like at Penn, you can take master's programs as an undergrad, you can sub-matriculate, you can take classes not under your major. So like I took psychology in my freshman year. So I think all these things are something to look at, like, will you be able to explore any curiosities you have or anything, basically anything at the school, and do you have the flexibility?
Angelica, anything that comes to mind from your perspective?
I think what I found useful as a high school student applying was reaching out to an actual student from Penn. If you're looking at understanding the school in itself, I think it would be very useful to like like reach out to one of us or an alumni from Penn to give you like the student Filipino international student perspective. And I think more often than not, they'd also be very willing and like helpful to maybe like even edit your essays and like talk to you about how like brainstorm ideas with you in terms of packaging your application. My mentor was actually from camp and she was as Penn as well.
Yeah, and Conroy, you would know this firsthand, based on your own experience, coming in as a freshman to Penn soon, but also the leadership of camp and others from Penn are involved with camp as well. So I'm sure you've got, in addition to the larger Filipino network. So thank you for that. And the last question I'm going to ask you before we move on to the Q&A is, I know I'm putting you in the spot a little bit, Lorenzo, because your journey has been shorter at Penn and you came in the dead of winter and, and so on and so forth. But for the three of you, and I know Alex had to leave us, but for the three of you, a favorite Penn experience in any realm, what comes to mind as one of those memories that you want to share that resonated with you during your time at Penn? I know that's a tough question because it hits you in many different ways, right? There's the friends, the academics, what you do outside of class, and other sort of impressions along the way. So I'm asking you to go down memory lane a little bit here before we wrap up.
I think one of my favorite experiences is currently what I'm doing now, which is the research. I'm just learning a lot from the upperclassmen, from the grad students, and from talking with like the professor too. I think it's such an interesting experience, and it just shows me a whole new like aspect of what engineering is. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I'm returning to the lab like for the next 2 summers, and I'm probably going to be doing some volunteer work with them throughout the semesters. So yeah, I think this is probably one of the big highlights of my like freshman year plus freshman summer.
Yeah, and to, as I know many students have joined us, since we started. So share what your research is on. What is the research project that, in shall we say layman's terms, as everyone does not have the same insight into the finer points of the research that you're doing. So,
okay, so what's the simplest way to put it? We're levitating micro flyers or like discs of like micro thin thickness. So they're about, I think, less than 100 microns thick, and we're levitating them using light. And so that creates like a temperature difference on the top and the bottom, which affects the way like air and particles bounce off it.
well, thank you for sharing that. And one area we haven't really talked that much about, because you were mentioning, these are opportunities to interact with your peers, with graduate students, and with faculty. Any thoughts just about, the faculty interaction? Because, we talk a lot about coming to university and having an opportunity to, live in college houses with faculty, do research with faculty. And faculty are more than someone that's lecturing you. They're part of a community and part of the people that you connect with. Any reflections on that for the short time that you've been on campus and your freshman year?
I think like for my freshman year, for my classes, whenever I had an issue, it was very easy to approach the professors. They'd always be helpful, and office hours are also a great way to talk to them. And they're very understanding of like issues you might have or might come across. Like for one of my classes with my engineering 105 class, my professor was very accommodating when I had a few issues that prevented me from submitting my project on time. So he gave me additional guidance, and yeah, he helped me basically reach my goal of finishing the midterm project.
Well, thank you for sharing, and I know that's sort of a two-pronged question. I was asking you to share your experiences, but I don't want to neglect access to faculty and all of that, because that is a very important topic. So Angelica or Kate, if either of you have anything to add to what Lorenzo said in terms of your own experiences, before I put you on the spot with your favorite Penn experience, please share.
So one thing I really love about Penn faculty is they really put in an effort to help you, like as a student. So it's not just like they're giving you an assessment and like you submit, and if you don't submit, you're just like 0 for that assessment. They're very like, if you explain your situation, they're very understanding. And even professors you're not in like part of the classes of, like, they're also mostly willing to just have random chats with you. I remember this one professor, his name is Justin McDaniel, and he was very interesting because he had a class where you had to be completely silent for like 4 hours every Wednesday, and I was intrigued, and I just cold emailed him. I was like, I'm very interested in your research about like Buddhism, and like he's been to the Philippines as well. He lived in Intramuros for some reason. And I just wanted to talk to him, and he invited me over to his office, and then we talked about like Penn and life, and then doing research in the Philippines. And he was just a cool dude. And I think like generally Penn professors are very interesting, very smart, but also on top of that, like welcoming to their students. Like they know they're there as resources and want to help you be an awesome person yourself.
Yeah, he's done some interesting classes. I mean, he took one of the global seminars to a monastery in Thailand, the whole class. And I think, as you were saying, he's known for committing to silence in his class. And just imagine being on a university campus and not speaking. I'm just curious how that worked, with the rest of campus life, with committing to total silence in the course, right? It's one thing if you're in a monastery in Thailand, it's something else if you're on the university campus, but
yeah, definitely. I'm actually planning to take his class like in the spring. And I already like told him about it, but I also don't understand, like, how do you not talk outside class? I don't.
Maybe it's putting committing to not being on social media and all of that, but maybe it's total silence. You'll have to share once you have a chance to take that class. So, but thank you for that. And Kate, anything to add before we move on to go back to the experience?
I think beyond just the professors themselves, the teaching assistants of Penn are just so helpful. I remember when I took my first and only math class at Penn, I was really just struggling, and I would have to go to my TA's office hours every week and just have her ask her the dumbest questions, and she'd just be there and be so patient and understanding and helping me understand all these concepts that I found so difficult.
Well, thank you for that. And while you're on camera, Kate, anything you would want to share in terms of your going down memory lane with your favorite experience, your Penn experience? Anything that comes to mind?
Ranking is hard, but definitely one of my favorite experiences would be when in the fall semester, when we were still in quarantine, and the Filipinos there had this idea of throwing me a half birthday, which is basically 6 months away from my birthday, and they threw a celebration where my roommate tricked me into wearing formal clothes, and then at 6 p.m. they kind of just all barged in with the cake and taco food, and we just had such a great time talking, but also it was election day, so we were waiting for Joe Biden to win and all these things, and it was just so fun.
Great. Angelica, anything that you would want to share as a favorite experience or one of your favorite experiences?
I think similarly, because Penn is such an intense workload environment, I really value the people who made it really worth it. And for me, that was my friends, my classmates, and my a lot of my TAs. And I think in quarantine, Kate was mentioning that we were essentially, for you don't understand, for a year and a half, like 5 people, like me, Kate, Alex, and like other people. We're just living together, and a lot of our summer plans were canceled. And we were all incredibly stressed because we lost our plans and our life was unstable. But somehow we found like we still found a way to cope with life together. And I think my favorite experience with in Penn has really just been hanging out with my friends, and that includes like throwing things like half birthday parties, or like I don't know what else you did. Quarantine was tough, but it was a very meaningful time.
I mean, it's something that, you know, everyone around the world is dealing with, but I think you underscore something very important, even if we take the quarantine out of it and just talking about experiences in general, is the importance of the people that you meet and interact with. And I think finding a university that offers the kinds of academic programs that will stretch you and that you're interested in and extracurricular, but also where the people resonate with you, you know, people that are going to be lifelong friends. And, you know, if something as awful as the pandemic happens, you know, these are people you want to spend time with, you know, that are going to support you and be there for you. But thank you so much for those comments, and don't go away. We want to continue this dialogue, but Conrad, I know we have not taken any questions from the audience yet, and I know some might have left us for other sessions, but we want to do that. And I think there are some questions here in the chat, so I'll take a look.
For sure, I can read them out to you actually, and I can also end the recording right now if you're okay.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
Okay.